So I'll move this over here so I'm looking more into the camera. Let's see. Oops. Home business. Rad. YouTube. Oh. Okay, so now I'm hearing me over my phone. How weird is that?
I'm watching you live. I see you live right now.
Okay, I'm just queuing up the intro, and then we may have to mitigate. I'm not sure if we start getting feedback from the phone. I don't know. We'll play it by ear. Let me close this. Okay, we got YouTube going. Go ahead and talk on the mic for a minute.
Hey, this is MRI Man. We're doing a Q&A. I'm here with Ron. Happy to see you guys. Been waiting to do this for a long time. And yeah, we're just going to be talking about how I got into MRI, why I got into MRI, and just, answering any questions you guys got.
Cool. So I can hear you.
First time, yeah.
I can hear you over my phone, but I can't hear you coming out of the computer speaker. So let me play with some stuff on my computer and make sure. Well, here, I'll try this.
I just realized.
Okay, so that's my intro. Are you guys, Dennis, you're in the comments section already. Can you hear us? Dennis, Eduardo. Yeah, cool. Well, Vaughn can hear both of us. Right on. So I guess that's good enough. I can't hear Kwame off the computer speaker, but I can hear you over the phone speaker, so it works for me. If it's good with everybody else, we'll go ahead and start a little bit early and start playing around. Yeah, Dennis and Vaughn both said they can hear you just fine, Kwame, so that's cool. I'm gonna pull up your MRI channel too, because I'm gonna add a link to that in the comment section for people.
Oh, awesome.
Cool. There you are.
What's up, Samurai Man? I'm back again. For those of you who are new, I put videos out every Thursday and Friday about radiology.
Right on. Okay.
There it is.
I don't think anybody get mad if we start a few minutes early. I'm going to go ahead and roll the intro, then I'll introduce you, and we'll kick it off. Sound good?
Let's do it. I'm going to share this on Instagram.
Yeah, blow it out. Blow it out, share it with everybody.
Let's do it.
That reminds me, I'm going to hop over to Facebook real quick and tell the group that we're on. See if I can find a link here. Where can I grab? Maybe it's that button. Yes, indeed. There's my link. Okay. Grab that. Add it to the group. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Just realize, everybody is here to party.
Greetings and welcome, fellow barium intists, fluoroscopists, and cross-table lateralists. I am your host, and I am not a radiology technician. Nope, I'm a technologist, and I've been in this field long enough to know that just because you came into my emergency room at 2 a.m. with a chronic back pain times 6 years does not mean the x-ray should be stabbed. This is the Radiologic Technologist Podcast, or RadTech by RadTech. Thanks for listening.
Cool. That always kicks it off. I'm Ron Jones. This is my channel, the Radiologic Technologist. I have a Facebook group as well that I link to in the comment bar here in a second. I'm doing a Saturday live Q&A every Saturday, mostly for students and people looking to get into the field of radiology. This is like our 5th time or so doing this. It's working out really well, answering a lot of questions. What I found in my 20 years of radiology is there just wasn't a good source for getting information for people who are interested in the field. And I think a lot of people are starting to come out of their shell now and starting to share, and you're seeing more and more channels, which I highly promote. In fact, I've got one co-hosting with me today. His name is Kwame, and you can find him right here. I'll link to it in the sidebar. Kwame is Mr. MRI Man. He's an MRI certified technologist, and he's going to be on an open mic with me to talk about the world of MRI. Kwame, go ahead and tell him a little bit about yourself.
Hey, what's up, guys? What's up, Ron? Thanks for having me. Been watching your show for a while. It's awesome. Let's see, where do I start? I've been an MRI tech over 3 years going in. The way I went to school was through a private school, actually. And the name of that school is called Casaloma College, Southern California. And I've been doing YouTube since 2017. My channel is all about radiology. I enjoy helping people that are interested in the field, and I like the whole community of all the techs. You know, it's cool to have everyone together on here. There's not many channels like this, so I'm really grateful that, you know, people like Ron. There's some other cool channels out there. It's really awesome that we can get together and just talk about our job and what it's really like. Because when I got into MRI, I didn't have anyone. I didn't really have any mentors. I couldn't really ask anybody. I didn't know too many technologists. So this is awesome that we can do this. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and I'm glad to have you, and you're exactly right. When it comes to mentors and things like that, it's really tough. The most successful people in the world will tell you they didn't get there on their own. Arnold Schwarzenegger, people that are just uber famous, uber successful, Tony Robbins, different kinds of people, they'll tell you they had a mentor. They had multiple mentors. Arnold's got videos all over YouTube about who his mentors were. I mentioned Jim Rohn. I mentioned Anthony Robbins because most people know who that is, a motivational speaker. His mentor was Jim Rohn, who's another person that I talk about a lot. He says a lot of things that are very pertinent. You know, when people talk about, I'm at a job that sucks and the people are mean or the pay is low. One of my favorite quotes from Jim Rohn is, if you're not happy in life, move. You're not a tree. And he just gives a lot of advice that you just don't hear a lot of it anymore. We don't have the mentors out there. It's influencers that are all about themselves, or there's really no influencers in our world of radiology. So when I was looking for stuff, I was having a hard time finding information, and about all I could find were forums buried on places like salary.com or Career Builder, or Monster back then was a job board. And you never really knew the experience or the integrity of the people leaving the information. And then I also found a lot of clickbait type websites that now that I've been blogging for several years and I kind of know how it all works, these clickbait sites, their whole purpose is to get you to their site and get you to sign up for information, which they farm out and they get paid for signups. And so they'll say anything they need to say to get somebody there. They'll say X-ray school is only 6 months. And so people that don't know the difference see that and they go, well, I'll go where it's only 6 months instead of these other ones that are 2 years. And they sign up for more information, and the website gets paid for every time somebody turns over a lead or generates a lead like that for an X-ray school. And it's just garbage, and it's misinformation. And you can see a lot of it by the word technician out there. And I'm not going to get on the soapbox about radiology technician, because truthfully, early on in the radiology career, all the way up to about 1950, one of our 2 guiding organizations was called technicians, and we were called technicians. So the stigma out there that the technicians are the people that fix the equipment and the technologists are the people that take the x-rays or do the exams, that's true now, but it wasn't always true. So, we can poke fun, agitated that somebody uses the word technician. It's not really worth getting into an argument over that phrase anymore. If you do a little research, and I have a post on my blog about the history of the ASRT and the ARRT, and it explains all of that going back to the beginning. But Kwame's out there with the MRI channel, like you said, since 2017, sharing his, and probably most of you have too, is the hospitals always hound us, and they say you can't take any pictures in the hospital, you can't take any video in the hospital, there's patient information, you're a HIPAA violator. And a lot of that on a platform like YouTube or on a platform like Kwame right now is actually talking to you through Clubhouse. If you haven't heard about Clubhouse yet, Clubhouse is a newer platform. You can only get in it by invite. I have 4 invites available if you're interested. Go to my blog, go to the comment section at the top, or the contact me section at the top. It'll take you to a contact page and send me a request, and I'll be happy to send you an invite. But Clubhouse is interesting. It's like I said, a brand new platform, and because it's invite only, it's kind of one of those Silicon Valley hotspots that everybody's trying to get into. It's not that hard if you pay attention, but it's kind of like a podcast in that it's only audio, but you really kind of have 2 sections when you're looking at your phone on the app. The top section are what they call admins, and the bottom are just kind of people in the room. These are called rooms that we're talking in. And so if I start a room, if I start it like I did today, and Kwame joined as an observer, I can click him and add him as an admin, and rooms with like 50 admin and 300 people just in the room listening. And admin can control their own microphone. So Kwame could talk right now at any point that he wants to. We would just be talking on top of each other. But the cool part about this is you can now collaborate with people in real time. Although you can't see each other, you can hear each other. So if I get a comment in the comment section on YouTube that says, tell me about MRI coils or something like that, I can turn the floor over to Kwame or any other person that's in the admin section, and they can give answers. So when we're talking about the purpose of doing this live Q&A or doing these channels to share information, this is kind of really the goal of it all, is get experts on the line so that they can speak their expert opinion, share their experience, and get the knowledge out there. Because that's what we were finding in the past, was there was not enough information that was valid that would tell people about these different things. So we got a few people in the comments section. Reading with Gabby says, hi, thanks for joining us, Gabby. And if you have any questions, anybody that's on, just post them in the comments section. Vaughn says, how do you join Clubhouse? So let me grab my link from my blog here, and on my contact page, you just put in your name, email address, and there's a little text section right here. So I'll drop that in there. Go to that link I just dropped in the comment section, send me your name, email, and that you want a Clubhouse invite. And Clubhouse, the way it works, to be specific, is you have to be in my contact list on my phone, and I have to be in yours. so that when I go into Clubhouse and I invite you, Clubhouse looks through my contact list to make sure we're friends. And that's how I keep people from just spamming out the invites. Plus, you only get 2 or 3 to start with. And once you burn those 2 or 3, it has an algorithm that judges how often you use Clubhouse and determines how many more invites to give you. So I've used it for the last 3 weekends now. So I used my first few. Now it's giving me 4 more invites. So it's a slow process, but we can, as we grow our Clubhouse group, we can start inviting more and more people. And Clubhouse has Clubhouse rooms. I don't know what they're called, club rooms or whatever they're called. And there's only 3 for medicine in total, 3 rooms for medicine that only speak about medicine. So I put in an application to create a radiology room or club, so that people, when you search Clubhouse by definition or by search word and you put in radiology, nothing even comes up. So there's nobody on Clubhouse right now talking about radiology at all. So once I get this Clubhouse room, exclusive room established, then we can start scheduling weekly meetings and going in there and sharing information and things like that. But to get an invite, just use that contact form, shoot it to me, and then we'll talk through email, exchange each other's contact information, and I'll shoot you an invite that way. Ryan says, I have applied for a rad tech program and waiting to hear about an interview. What are some ways a candidate can stand out in an interview for a rad tech program? That's okay. You can call me Dennis. I've been called worse, right? So I have, I pitched the blog a lot because my blog has been there. Next month will be 2 years that I've been answering questions with blog posts. And so there are over 200 blog posts answering common questions just like this. So if you go there, in the right upper corner is a search box. And if you type in whatever keywords you're looking for, like interview, it'll show you all the articles that I've written that have to do with the word interview. The one that you're interested in, if you're talking about how to get into rad tech school or how to do the interviews, it's, let me think. It was about, I think I wrote how to get accepted into, let me put the word accepted. The other thing you can do is go to the sitemap at the top. The sitemap is a page that I listed everything by title. So you kind of see, it's kind of like a directory. So you can just quickly read through the titles and see what they are. Let me see if I can find the article. Yeah, so here's one for you, how to get accepted into rad tech school. And it may come down to just getting in there and looking around on my blog. But if you go to the sitemap, and I'll go ahead and link it to you, the sitemap has like the first 100 or so articles listed by title. I haven't gone back in a while. Yeah, it's got 113. I haven't been to that page in a while to update it. I've just been really pushing for people to use the search bar. But it also lists some of the videos on there too, and then the 2 podcasts. If you want to hear some fun podcasts when you're driving to work or something like that, I actually interviewed the mobile radiographer in Hollywood. Her name is Trish, and she had some hilarious stories to tell about. You can't tell who the stars are. You can't violate HIPAA. But she was in one posh location where the butlers or whatever they were required that they positioned her portable, positioned her tube the best they could, put the cassette behind the guy's back for a chest x-ray, and did as much as they could with her explanation. And then she walked up and adjusted it just right, shot the image, and then they retrieved it. They had to do everything for this superstar, but she had lots of crazy stories, taking x-rays by the poolside. It was really interesting to interview. The other podcast is the person who actually started the whole movement of stop shielding. We've all heard how they want us to stop shielding patients now. So I reached out to Dr. Rebecca Marsh, who is the physicist and the co-author of the American Academy of Physicists in Medicine, the AAPM. She wrote Patient Shielding and Diagnostic Imaging Discontinuing a Legacy Practice, indicating that legacy meaning we've all done it and we all know about it. And you guys know when this movement started, everybody was like, no way am I going to stop shielding my patient. I've been trained since I was born that we have to shield against those harmful beams. And after talking to her for an hour and interviewing her and doing some research, it makes a lot of sense. And I won't, you can go listen to it if you want, or you can read the article that I wrote about it. But it really comes down to three things. It comes down to our equipment is 96% more efficient now than it was 30 years ago. So there's a lot less dose coming out. It comes down to when you put lead over a piece of anatomy that you want to exclude. Now that we've got these automatic collimators, the AECs, when they are shooting a beam and they hit that lead, they recognize the density and treat it as if it's super dense tissue, and they amp up the beam that they're pushing out. So yes, it does not get through the lead, but all the area around it got more dose than it would have gotten if there was no lead, because the lead caused the AEC to trigger more dose. So you got more efficient machines, you got the lead triggering more dose in the surrounding areas. And then the third was people that are using, they did studies, and in a lot of cases, people that place like a lead gonad shield, for example, when they're doing a hip or something, slightly cover up that femoral head. And so they got to retake it, repeat it, and do it again. So you're getting more dose. So with those three things combined, the APM went to the ACR, and the ACR said, we agree. And a lot of people are getting behind it, except the ASRT, right? The ASRT waited and waited and waited until enough techs said, we need somebody to stand up for the techs, because we can't just stop shielding. We need somebody to back us up. Either our hospitals have to start writing policies us up, or the ASRT has to come out with something to back us up, because patients are going to flip out if we tell them we're not going to use lead shields on you anymore with no education. So the ASRT finally pushed back and said, we want to see more proof. And I kind of went off on a tangent on that, but it's important because you're all going to see it. There's already hospitals that have already instituted no shielding and have policies in place to stop shielding. So another good resource for you. Vaughn says, how long does it take to hear back if you're accepted? I think it's instant. Does it depend? Oh, you mean from the school? Does it depend on the school, or is it after the deadline is up? Yeah, so it's just like jobs. You interview, you apply, they interview everybody, they get together in their little group and have a powwow, and they decide which candidates are going to take. Because you got to remember, these schools graded on a lot of things. They're graded by JCERT, they're graded by the community, they're graded by, if they take just any old student and some of them don't pass and they drop out, or they can't pass the ARRT exam, it makes that school look bad. And that gets back to JCERT, and that gets back to the community. And if they're getting any state money, it'll start affecting the state money, because they have to show the state that their grads are finding jobs when they get out. And if they're failing out or they can't pass the boards, that looks bad and they start losing state funding. So it's in the school's best interest to pick the very best candidates. And a lot of times I question how they're doing that, because as a director over the years, I've seen students and I'm like, how in the world did you even get into the program? But it's up to usually like 2 or 3 people at the school, and so it's up to you as the student trying to get in to do everything you can to make your application as strong as possible. And I list a lot of that on my channel in my blog. One of the first 5 videos I did on YouTube, I took a bunch of my questions that I ask in interviews and I shared those, and then I shared what we're looking for in the answers. It's called reverse engineering the interview questions. I give the question and what we're looking for in the answer, and what that question tells us about the person. So you should go check that out as well, and just look at all the stuff that's out there. Interviewing, showing up on time, dressing for success, have questions ready for them. When they turn around at the end and say, do you have any questions for us? Don't just say no. Ask them intelligent questions. And I listed those on, I think a couple Saturdays ago we talked about that, but you should ask Where are your clinical rotations? Are they automatically assigned, or do I get to pick my clinical rotations? What's your pass rate? What's your fail rate? What's your board passing rate? What's your percentage of graduating students? And ask for like the last 5 years, because you may see a trend. Maybe they had a crappy director and got a better one, and now they're trending up, or vice versa, and they're graduating less and less people are passing the boards. Look through some of these histories on videos and blog posts, and you'll find a lot of stuff about that. So Vaughn, MRI Man, said there, "What's up? Glad to hear you on the podcast." You want to give a shout out to Vaughn?
Oh, shout out Vaughn. You guys got any questions for me? Let me know.
We have a lag, MRI Man and I, that we discovered when we were setting this up right before the YouTube live. So you'll probably hear some pauses in between, because we don't want to step on each other and talk at the same time. So Ryan, you're welcome. Fire Runner says hi. Football News, hi. Football News says, got a question, fire it away. Glaucus, how are you doing today? Saturday, man, I went to go to my favorite barber and get some work done on the beard, and walked in the door at 1:30, and the guy said, "Sorry, we're not taking any more today." And that's a big bummer, man. I look forward to my trims and cleaning up this mess. But that's how my day's been going. Not quite as planned, but I thought it'd be nice to do this live in the afternoon for a change and try out some different time zones. I know MRI Man, I'm pretty sure last week wasn't able to get to the 9 o'clock, so moving it around to see if more people can join us and chime in. Really, that's what we're here for, is to answer as many questions as possible. Glaucus, do you remember the names of the radiology software? If you mean the studying software, there's more out there now than when I took it, but mine was Appleton and Lang. There was an Appleton and Lang CD. It was under $50, I think, and it had 1,000 questions, and it was broken down by category. I would pop it in my computer, and I would just study one category at a time. And there's different methods for studying, and I share some scientific methods on the blog, and I'll do a search on the blog with the word pass and see if I can come up with that. Let's see. Nope, that's too general of a term. But I list some methods for studying, like short burst studying versus cramming all night long. Studies show that if you try to cram, it's right here. If you try to cram, you're not going to retain as much. So you set a timer for 20 minutes. And at 25 minutes, you get up and walk around for 5 minutes, then you sit back down. But in that article that I just linked, it talks about spaced repetition and how it works, the advantages of it, how to use it, and the applications. And then I talk about force multipliers, which is another way of saying stacking things on to make you even more efficient. So force multiplier, for example, would be the Pomodoro technique, and that's the timing one I just talked about. And then bonus tips to maximize your study time. There's choosing your study sanctum, right? Your study cave, your back cave. What makes it a good study room? Is your TV on? Is there lots of traffic outside? Is there something distracting you? So pick a good sanctum. Choose a single target of focus. Use the right tools to study. Keep your study sessions sacred. Don't let people call and then you get sidetracked or whatever. Turn your phone off. Tell your friends you'll be unavailable. Set the things that distract you aside. Make sure you have time for recovery between your study sessions. You can study alone or you can study in groups. There's power in both. I talk about the Appleton and Lang review and the Mosby's review in detail. I talk about electronic flashcards, the mock ARRT exams, and then an exam day routine, because failing to prepare is preparing to fail, right? You've all heard that. So plan ahead. Scout out where your test is the night before. Don't wait till crap, I'm running late the day of my exam, and you go to try to find Pearson View where they do the test and you can't find it, because then you're really in a panic. And then if you do find it on time and you get in there, now you're a little bit messed up because you're so panicked. So prepare for the day, arrive 15, 30 minutes early. I list some relaxation techniques. They offer headphones there. You can use those if it makes it easier on you. So check out that article, Glaucus, about how to study for the exam, and it should help out quite a bit. So let's see, Christina, thanks for being live. I have the opportunity to go straight into MRI. Should I just go into that, or should I do X-ray tech first and then go into MRI? I have my opinions on that, but I'm going to let MRI man talk about that. And Kwame, you just tell me when you're done.
All right. So yeah, that's a great question, Christina, and I get that question a lot. And this is just my opinion on it. And so let me give you the situation I was in. I was a phlebotomist. I was doing that for about 3 years, and I have a family. I have 2 kids. I have my wife, and I'm working full time, and I'm trying to figure out, this is not paying the bills. This is not doing it. So I'm like, okay, I'm looking for an X-ray school. So I go to the community college. I'm in Southern California. I go to community college, and they're like, well, there's a waiting list for this rad program. It's like 3 years. So I'm like, man, that's not going to really work. So then I started looking at private schools, and they had at the time, I think it was called Kaplan College. They have an X-ray school there. And they wanted me to go like every day, Monday through Thursday, which wasn't working with my schedule. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? So I started looking around more, and then I had a friend that was an MRI tech, and we were just kind of hanging around, and he was like, yeah, I went to the school, it's called Casa Loma. They have a Saturday school there, and the rest is online. So I was like, all right, that's great. That works for me. So I go to an orientation, and I was a little nervous. I hadn't been to school in a while, a couple of years, and I was like, is this something I can do? Is it like accelerated? So asking a lot of questions, to the director, and the MRI tech, I knew he was kind of a friend, but I couldn't get so much information. I had an idea of what MRI techs did by reading books and watching some videos online, but I never had like a real good mentor. It seemed interesting to me, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. Ended up doing the Saturdays, 8-hour Saturdays, long days. Did some online school, and continued to work full time. I was a full-time phlebotomist, and I was actually also driving Uber. I was doing Amazon deliveries. I was, just hustling, and it worked for me. It worked for me. The loan you're looking at, I would say it was like about $30,000. Okay, and yeah, that's a lot of money, but I've seen people spend more on cars. Like they spend more money, like 30 grand on a car, and then I tell them 30 grand for school, and they freak out. And I've seen people doing this at my phlebotomy job, which we were not making good money at all. We were making like maybe $14, $15 an hour. This was years ago. This was back in like 2009, 10. And they would buy cars that were like 25 grand, and didn't make sense. So I was like, I'm gonna invest in myself. Yeah, it's gonna be more money, but I needed something a little bit quicker. I knew I was very interested in MRI. I wasn't super interested. I wanted to be an X-ray tech, but the end goal, I didn't want to get into MRI. It worked for me, and sometimes I look back and I kind of wish I went for X-ray just to be a multiple modality tech, and that's going to make your resume look nice, and it'll be easier for you to get into hospitals and things like that. That's just, you gotta just see if you really want to be an X-ray tech, and you gotta really look at it. Don't just get into it for the money. The X-ray tech job is pretty hard, and it's a lot of work. They don't get paid as much as an MRI tech, but then you could cross-train the MRI, you can cross-train the CT, so that's cool too. But I have seen X-ray techs just get stuck in X-ray for years, like 3 years, and they haven't been able to cross-train, and they kind of get stuck at a job. So just kind of think what works for you and your schedule. Do you have time to wait around to get into the rad program? I was like 25, so, and I had my 2 boys and my wife, and I was kind of like, man, I got to make a move. I don't really got 3 years to be waiting around. So I would say just see what your options are, what works for you, what's your schedule like, and yeah, that's really what I got to say about that. And I'm gonna pass it back to Ron.
Cool. So we have a lot more in common than I even realized. I started out in phlebotomy as well. So people who say, what's a good job while you're waiting to get into radiology or an X-ray tech program or any healthcare job, what's a good field or a good career temporarily that will teach me about healthcare, teach me about how a hospital works, get me used to blood, the sight of blood, get me used to poking people maybe. And phlebotomy is really an awesome place to start. I did phlebotomy for about 10 years prior, and to me, that was the first step into a job that had a set pay, because prior to that, I was a small business owner. I was in Phoenix and trying to figure out what I wanted to do there. I was up on top of it was called Squaw Peak at the time, hiking, and I was looking out over the valley, and I'm like, what am I going to do for a living? You know, I'm 25 or whatever. And I noticed there's just swimming pools everywhere. So I started a swimming pool service and repair and did that for a couple years. And it was cool. I got to drive around in my pickup and wear shorts and do my own schedule. But one thing you notice when you're running your own company is you're still kind of slave to getting paid. And if your customer decides not to pay you, there's nothing you can really do about it, unless you want to try to take them to small claims court or something stupid. So the point came where like Kwame, I had a family and I had to figure out how to get a steady income, and then the benefits would be really nice too. So I went to a place called Pima Medical Institute. It was in Mesa back then, on Priest, and took a little entrance exam type thing. And I had been going to Arizona State because I'm from a generation, and I've kind of been reading more and more about this. I'm a Gen X, and you don't hear a lot about the Gen X. It's always boomers against millennials, and we're sitting back laughing at the whole thing. But my generation was told, if you get a degree, your life is set. You got it made. You can make all the money you want, all the money you need, and it's just wrong. And I think that trickled down to some other generations, because I'm reading a lot on Reddit and stuff, these Gen Zs and Ys, and saying, man, I went and got my degree and I'm living at home still with my parents because I can't find a job. And how this all ties together is it's not really about those stupid degrees as it is about learning how to do something that's a skill. And when I went to Pima Medical Institute and I took their entrance exams, I qualified. I was seeking out the phlebotomy program because that's all I knew about. I didn't know anything about X-ray, and I knew that it was paying like $13 an hour or whatever back then, which was decent. And when they said, yeah, you got accepted, but we also have this X-ray program, would you rather do that? And I said, no, I'm going to ASU to get my bachelor's because that's what will make me successful. Because I was in that old mindset, which was completely wrong. And now looking back, I kick myself because I could have started X-ray school like 10 years earlier. But I got the phlebotomy. I did the phlebotomy for 10 years. And it was really cool because phlebotomy is an excellent starting job in the healthcare field, because if you think about, and common people don't know this, people outside of healthcare don't know this, but when a patient comes in to see a doctor, whether it's the emergency room or whatever, and they say, I hurt, right here, whatever, the doctor does 3 things. He does his own evaluation, primary and secondary evaluation, listens to the heart, checks your pulse, gets a history, and tries to kind of put all that knowledge together with what he learned in school to see if it directs him towards any particular diagnosis. But more times than not, he will also order lab work and x-ray or some other imaging modality, because that gives him more information that he can't get on his own. The doctors cannot do that themselves. They have to have somebody else who's trained. He can collect the blood if he wants to, but he can't run the test. He has no idea how to take that tube of blood and put it in a machine and run it. He's trained in reading the results, but you need a lab tech who went to school to run that exam and to understand how to run that test. But as a phlebotomist, you get to be the person that's kind of front line. You go in and take that blood. You learn what tubes mean different things, because there's different additives in each tube that preserves that blood. Some preserve the red blood cells, some preserve the hemoglobin or the plasma. There's like 20 different tubes. Of course, now it's automated, so when you get your patient labels, it tells you what tubes to draw. But in the school, they teach you what tubes are for what. So phlebotomy teaches you that the part of this diagnostic process. Patient has a problem, doctor sees them, starts to figure out what kind of test they need, and then lab does their job and imaging does their job, and we give our reports back to the doc, and then he looks at it all and he tries to figure it out. He may even call the radiologist and say, help me understand what this CT result means, because they didn't go to school for that. The radiologist did. So a phlebotomist gets to learn how the whole process works. Plus, they're in the room a lot of times when the x-ray tech's there trying to get a portable, like in a trauma or just in any room, really. If you got lab there and x-ray at the same time, you get to interact and mingle and get to understand what each person does. In the lab, you get to know the entire hospital, because you're drawing blood on everybody located throughout the whole place. So you have a morning run, meaning every morning doctors always order the daily labs on their patients at like 4 in the morning. And part of it is because most people are fasting at 4 in the morning because they've been asleep all night. But part of it's also because he wants his result before he comes to work. He wants the results to be ready when he gets there. He doesn't want to be sitting there waiting for some results to come in. So he orders it kind of at the expense of the patient. Plus, they're in a fasting state. So as phlebotomists, we have to get up there at 3 o'clock in the morning and go room to room to room, kind of like a door-to-door salesman. You kind of knock, you say, I'm coming in, because you have to. And oftentimes you're waking the patients up. You explain what you're doing, who you are, what you're there for. And then you start sticking and getting blood, and you move room to room. You have a tray, and you just start filling it up with all these tubes of blood. And so you learn the whole hospital. You learn what the ICU is and what they do. You learn the pediatric ICU or PICU, neonatal ICU or NICU. A lot of times they'll do their own, but you learn the ER, you learn the floors, telemetry. The phlebotomist is everywhere, just like the x-ray tech is everywhere, because everybody eventually ends up with some type of imaging exam for the most part. So whenever you talk about what's a good job to go into while you're waiting, phlebotomy is my number one, and it's a good income when you're starting out, and transporter is number two, because transport is kind of the same thing. You go all over the hospital, you kind of see what everybody does, and you get to learn what everybody does. They bring you a patient to a CT, and they sit there and wait for you, hopefully, till you're done, and then take the patient back. So they get to sit there and watch the exam and ask questions and learn. So that's another really good introductory job if you're waiting to get into a program. So I have a lot in common with you on that respect. And then you also brought up the waiting list. And I have articles and videos that talk about private school versus public school, because MRI Man talked about, I think he said 18 grand, no, 30 grand for his school. Well, mine was 18, but that was 2003. My wife, who went through about 2010, paid around 30 grand for x-ray school. But we both went to the private school, which always costs more. But the trade-off there is public school, literally it's like $8,000, but there's a 3-year waiting list, like MRI Man said. So, you know, you may think, well, I don't have the money for a private, I'll have to wait. But if you do the math, if you can get in right away at 30,000 and in 2 years graduate and you come out making 25 bucks an hour, the payoff is quicker and you make more money sooner and pay back that loan than you would if you waited 3 years to get in and then 2 more years to graduate, and then you're making the 25 bucks an hour. That's a 5-year span versus a 2-year span. So those extra 3 years you're working out of the private school, you're making $60,000 a year. So that's 180,000 in those 3 years because you went to the private school, where the public school model, you're still waiting, you're still working your $12 an hour job or whatever it is. So that's a good point too, private versus public. And then MRI Man brought up he went to school on the weekends, which is another good point. A lot of people don't know that you can do school on the weekends. When I was in x-ray school, one of the reasons I say when you're interviewing or even just checking out the school, always ask where the clinical rotations are and when they are if you can, because I got weekend rotations. I did a Friday, Saturday, Sunday clinical rotation and was able to work during the week, do clinicals on the weekend, and the weekend guy was the CT tech who was doing x-ray and CT. So when we weren't doing x-rays, he was teaching me CT, and I've said it 100 times on here, but when I graduated to x-ray school, I got hired as a CT tech, and I took my CT boards and got certified. So I learned how to do CT while I was an x-ray tech. So I jumped out of there at $20-something an hour as a CT tech versus back then it was 17. I got hired at one place as an x-ray tech and it was 17 an hour, and the other one I got CT tech and I was in my 20s. But make sure you find out about the different hours you can go to school, the different hours you can do clinicals, how late can you stay. There's not many, I don't think they're allowed to let you stay overnight. So a lot of people think, well, I'll work during the day and I'll work some night shifts or whatever. Typically, JCERT doesn't let you go past 10 p.m. And MRI Man brought up the cost for school. That's what I kind of touched on. Public's always cheaper, but it's math. Of course, it's always nice if you don't have to pay as much, because you do have to pay that back. And if you get student loans, it can be a nightmare. And then he brought up multi-modality is good for your resume. So that is also true, because you're asking about, Vaughn got accepted into MRI, and cute, that's cute. Got into MRI, should I go back to be x-ray? And MRI Man brought up that's true. It's better for your resume. It makes you a better overall tech in general, and it makes you more valuable. But you don't have to do it. You don't have to go back. Because see, what you're going to run into are a lot of old timers, if I'm classified as that, who say, I had to do it, so you have to do it. And that's crap. People are getting into MRI school now without doing anything else. And people are getting into ultrasound school now without having to do anything else. When I went in 2003, in that era, back in the Phoenix market, Gateway Community College would not let you apply to ultrasound school unless you had an ancillary degree already. You had to be a nurse or a physical therapist or a nuke med tech, respiratory therapist, or what? There's one other I can't remember. And I remember thinking, well, if you were one of those, man, you're already making enough money. Why would you go to be a nurse? I mean, be an ultrasound tech. But it was the same way for nuke med school. You had to be an x-ray tech first, or you had to be a physical therapist or a respiratory therapist, some other ancillary degree. And now you don't have to do that anymore. So I say to that question, if MRI is what you want to do, then just go grab that and grab that money, because you're going to come out in the $30 an hour range as an MRI tech. If you go back and learn x-ray, you're not going to make any more money than you are already making per hour. Now, the benefit's going to be like if you work in a hospital and let's say hours are getting cut or something in MRI because your volume's dropped or something, or your magnet goes out and you're down or something. If there's a shift open in x-ray there, and you should get paid your MRI wage no matter where you work. But I have seen hospitals that say, I will create different job codes for you. And if you, Mr. MRI tech, go and work in x-ray, you're going to get paid x-ray pay, which is garbage. Then you should say that I'm not going to do it, because you're not paying an x-ray tech to cover an x-ray shift. You're paying a multi-modality tech to go cover an x-ray shift. And if you want me to do it with my extra experience, then you're going to pay me what I'm worth. And I know that's hard for some people because a job's a job and you need money, but you can't get pigeonholed into accepting lower pay than what you're worth, because you're the one that sacrificed your family time, your personal time to become a multimodality tech. So I just warn you, because I'm a quad tech, and I've had bosses that just expect you to do it all, and they're not grateful. They don't understand what all we went through to go through all that training, and some do, and some appreciate it. But I say jump into those advanced right off the bat if you can. Don't listen to the people that say that's not how we used to do it. It's true. It's not how it used to be, but so what? That doesn't mean you shouldn't take advantage of that, man. If it were me, to be honest, starting over again, I would jump right into echo sonography, because echo school is the top pay of ultrasound, and it wasn't even 2 years at the time. It's like 8. Arizona Heart Institute in Phoenix had a school, and I applied, but I didn't make it because it was very well known and hard to get into. But those guys, I knew an echo tech making $52 an hour back when I was making 33 as a sonographer. And that cat, he was taking call. He was just making bank and just doing echoes, which, and I'm not belittling echoes. That's tough. People say, well, you're just imaging one muscle. How hard is that? I got to do the whole body. Well, you got to know what you're looking at. You got cardiologists breathing down your neck, because if they're going to do a stent, it depends on what you see in the echo. And so it's a tough job, just like every other job. But if you can jump straight into that and bypass X-ray, CT, MRI, and all that stuff, jump into echo and grab that bull by the horns, and then find somebody to cross-train you, into pediatric echo or neonatal echo. And then sky's the limit on the money you make. In fact, I don't even know any neonatals anymore. I knew some guys that did pediatric echo back in the Phoenix market, and they just were writing their own checks. It was ridiculous. So that's what I have to say about, should I go straight into an advanced modality or should I go back? There are advantages into having other modalities. If you want to go back and learn it because you're the kind of person that digs knowing stuff and you're okay with school, some people just hate school. So if you do, just don't bother. But if you like the knowledge and you want to learn it, X-ray and general X-ray is way cool, because they're kind of all over the place in all these different arenas, right? Ultrasound techs sit in their rooms and do ultrasounds all day, or they go portable if you do that. But some techs don't even like to go portable. You got to unplug the machine, turn it off, go plug it back in, turn it on, wait, blah, blah. X-ray has to go to the floor, has to go to the ICU, has to go to the emergency room, has to go to the OR. You actually get called into cases after they're over, so you can do a sponge count. If you've ever heard of a sponge count, they count everything that they use in the surgery. And if at the end of the surgery they go to count everything again and can't find something, it's X-ray that they call up there to take an X-ray. And everything that they use in the surgery has a radio tracer that can be seen on an X-ray. So you take a flat plate or a KUV or an abdominal film to see, did they leave a sponge in there or something like that. So I can't keep stopping to talk to you about the dog. I'm doing a live Q&A here.
I know, but he's so cute.
Yeah, you're the cutest puppy ever. I'm glad you got a new collar. Now I can actually reach my finger under it and grab you.
And
You're
the
trying to
bow
run
tie
off.
is so cute.
Yeah, nice. It's bad enough we got a poodle. Now you got to put a bow tie on.
It fits him perfectly.
Anyway, so we've had a lot of comments in there, and my wife's an X-ray tech too, so I try to get her in here to give her perspective.
See, look how beautiful he is with his cute old bow tie. He's such
That's
a
a
princess.
boy. That's a boy dog.
Cool
With
dog.
So anyway,
Sorry.
let me go. I'm way behind on the comments section. I've got MRI Man on with me in Clubhouse. He's actually live on the mic, sharing his expertise on MRI with me. So it's like a co-host.
Oh,
Yeah, we got that one. Radiology software. MRI Man's out in California. I'm a student of radiology. What are the postgraduate courses in radiology? Postgraduate courses in radiology. Well, if you mean advanced modalities, that's ultrasound, MRI, CT, nuke med, PET, IR, DEXA, mammo. There's quite a few. I'm not quite sure. Football news, if that's what you're talking about. And you're welcome for being live. Please at least talk. It will be our turn. Please at least talk. It will be our turn. Phlebotomy. Yeah, MRI Man. Phlebotomy is great. Yeah. And where phlebotomy ties into MRI Man is starting IVs. As an X-ray tech, you got to start your own IVs, and especially if you're in CT, and MRI starts their own. And if you're spoiled, you have radiology nurses that come do it for you. But that's another reason phlebotomy is a great launch pad into X-ray. Oh, I get it. You don't speak English. That's cool, man. Just do your best. No worries there. Um, let's see, Christina. I just took a phlebotomy course and waiting for my externship. I'm so glad to hear it helps. Yeah, I lost my job due to COVID. Definitely looking forward to a good career. Yeah, I could go on, and probably so could MRI man, about phlebotomy. It teaches you. To me, it was cool because I like medicine, and there's a book of lab tests that you can get that tells you what each lab test does, what it's an indicator of. Because one of the most complex things in the universe is the human body, and to try and figure out what's wrong with it takes ridiculous amounts of skill. So the lab can do thousands of blood tests, and each test can give you hundreds of different hints towards certain disease processes. So that was part of what I really liked about phlebotomy, was just learning. You may get a CBC, a complete blood count. People that don't know what that is won't have any clue what it tells you. But I know that it can tell you if you have an inflammation going on, if you have a low red blood cell count, which might account for why you're having a hard time breathing every now and then or tired. It can show you all kinds of information in one test. But I'll get off the phlebotomy deal. Because Instagram, I think I have an IG, but I just don't use it a lot. I stay busy enough with this other stuff, but you guys can always go through MRI man if you want to do the Instagram stuff for sure. I'll hand that off happily. Football News says I'm from Turkey. Which country good for job radiology? So that's the thing. Now that we as a global society are coming together a lot more on YouTube and Facebook and things like that, there's a big difference between how radiology functions around the world. And a lot of people don't know that, just like the common public thinks everybody that takes their x-ray is licensed. And we still have 6 states in America that don't even require a license. And any secretary in a doctor's office can take your x-ray. Like here in Idaho, where I live, there's not a required licensure. We've been trying for 20 years to get a licensure passed, and they just won't do it. So it's different here. Here in America, it's a 2-year program guided by JCERT, and you really can't deviate much from that. You have to pass the ARRT boards. Other countries, it can be as much as 3 years. There can be a lot more prerequisites than we have. It's just completely different. And another really hard thing to figure out is people say, well, can I get my license in Australia and go work in America, or vice versa? And I just don't see a lot of crossover. And maybe somebody at some point on a global scale will figure that out and say, look, these guys in America are trained good enough to go work in Australia, or vice versa. Quit making everybody get all these specialty licensures. Let's come up with one good licensure program and go global with it. I'd love to travel. I would love to go to Fiji and do CT or somewhere tropical and hang out for 6 months, but licensure doesn't let you do that kind of stuff. So Vaughn, MRI man, I'll look into that. I'm currently in the dental field, but looking to get my foot in the hospital to make it easier with working while going to school. Talked about transport as a job. I'm not sure what you're referring to, MRI man, when you said you hadn't thought about that. Do you want to elaborate? Still there? No.
Oh, yeah, sorry. What were you talking about?
In the comments section, you'd said that you'd never thought about something I brought up. I was going to let you elaborate on it if you remember what it was, because I don't remember what it was. I got behind on the comments.
I think it was when you were talking about the whole thing of going to school. I guess doing the private school versus a community college, because a lot of people that went to community college, they always ask me like, oh, but now you're stuck with that big loan, that $30,000 loan. But in reality, like you said, I got to work faster and started making money faster. And actually, I did get a job pretty quickly, like out of school, and I was making money, and I worked at an outpatient center for about a year, and then I got contracted to work at a hospital, and like my salary, it jumped up big, I went from making like, I think my first year I made about 60,000, and then my second year, since I got into that hospital, it went up to 100,000. So it jumped really quick, and to me, yeah, that private school was like worth it. The 30 grand or whatever, it was way worth it because my whole life changed. Like everything changed. My mood, we were able to go out and, you know, do things we like, travel, take the kids out. We had a great Christmas. Bills were paid on time. I wasn't worried about rent, and just all my stresses and everything just like it lowered, you know. And I actually was in Southern California, like in the San Fernando Valley area, and when I got out of school, that's when we decided to move to the Central Coast, just because there were some job openings, and I was like, well, you know, they want to hire me full time, so it was easy. It's easy to move too. Like we can talk about that. You know, being in the medical field in general, it's like you can find jobs everywhere. I even got a bonus to move up here. Not a whole lot, but I mean, it helped me move, and it's awesome. I love that part of the job where I can literally, you know, apply somewhere and travel almost anywhere, you know. It's awesome. So I love that, and that's cool that you brought that up. You know, you could be in a community college, like just waiting to get in the program, and say you had to wait. It took you a total of maybe 5 years, 6 years. Yeah, those 2 years you could have been making, you know, money easily over 30 grand. So what you said is just, it was really smart, and a lot of people don't consider that, you know. So that was great. That's great information.
Yeah, and you talk about being able to change jobs, and it's interesting because you watch the Facebook groups or maybe outside of the groups, and you'll catch somebody every now and then say, I went through X-ray school and I tried for, you know, 2 years and couldn't find a job, and I had to go do something else. And very rarely is there not something further under the surface of that problem. In other words, I mean, if you just think logically for a minute. If you go through 2 years of X-ray school and spend 2 years doing clinical rotations at, let's say you have 2 hospitals that they rotate you through a year each, those 2 hospitals just spend a year each training you how to do the job on their equipment, you know, their software, you know, their hospital layout. Why wouldn't they hire you? There's only 2 reasons that they would not hire a student after they graduated who did a rotation there. One is there's a hiring freeze, or there's something wrong with the budget, or they're just full time. The other thing is you did a bad job. And a lot of people, you know, I constantly say that you've got to look at your clinical as a huge job interview. And that's also another aspect of why you should be careful picking your clinical sites. If you're allowed to, you should pick a clinical site at a place you want to work when you're done. If you want to go work at a level 1 trauma and see all that adrenaline and gore and blood, then you should try to get your clinical there. If you want to work in an outpatient imaging center, try to get a clinical there. Because nobody in their right mind, no administrator is going to say, I know I just spent a year training you. I didn't have to pay for it because you paid for your own school. You worked for a year and paid somebody to work for a year. But I just don't feel like hiring you. I want to train somebody completely unknown to me. It's not going to happen. They're going to hire somebody that they just spent 6 months to a year training, unless you had problems. And I've only met one guy so far in my career who, and I didn't dig super deep, but I did have some conversations with him because I wanted to understand why did he have such a hard time finding a job after he graduated. And he was a middle-aged man. He was probably mid-40s. And I don't see a lot of bias among administrators. We really don't care how old you are. In fact, I see more bias towards the younger ages because they're all worried about, are you going to get pregnant and go out and be a mommy for a while? And because if you work in radiology in a big enough department, you see a freaking fourth of our workforce gets pregnant and disappears for 3 months and then comes back. And then a year or two later, they're pregnant again, and then they disappear, and then they come back. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's life. But you'll see some administrators. I had an office manager once who was over the radiology staff, the secretaries, the schedulers and whatnot, and she would hire middle-aged women who didn't have kids at home because she didn't want to have to deal with getting pregnant and waiting for them to go out on maternity, which I can't tell you how many times we had to talk about that, but that's just how some people are. And so the job scarcity that MRI Man's talking about, how he jumped around from job to job, if you're good at what you do and you're confident and you can talk to people, you should be able to move around at will for the most part. Now, in the middle of COVID, no. In the middle of COVID or some major recession or something that's affecting everything, just stay where you're at for a while. But once things get back on their feet, I've had as many as 3 jobs at one time. I had a full-time and 2 PRNs. This kind of work, and that's why I get really frustrated when I hear people, and I see them in my Facebook group. Somebody will say, I did a job interview and I'm looking forward to seeing if I got the job or not. And I'll comment, make sure you negotiate your pay. And somebody will chime in and say, oh, we should just be thankful we got a job. And I'm like, no, that's not how this works. You didn't go to school for 2 years and sacrifice everything so that you can be thankful that somebody hires you. They should be thankful that you did all that sacrifice and are now going to provide your expertise for that hospital. And so I talk a lot about how to negotiate and that it never hurts to negotiate. If they're going to call you and say you got the job, if you ask for another $1 an hour, if they're not going to go, never mind, we're going to go to the next person, because you don't understand how much time went into picking you. They had to get together in groups. They had to talk about who won. They had to do background searches on that person. They had to do fingerprints and drug screens and all these things. And if you're going to ask for $1, they're either going to go, okay, or they're going to counter, or they're going to say no. And if they say no, then you just say, all right, I guess I have to accept what you gave me. Again, I'm super grateful. When do I start? They're never going to say, forget it. We decided we're not going to hire you because you asked for more money. That's never going to happen. So anyway, the job thing, I did a study 3 years ago in my system that showed we were going to have a 40% increase in patient population over the next 10 years because this baby boomer generation, the greatest generation, the biggest generation of people out there right now, are in their 60s and 70s and older, and they're hitting the healthcare system hard right now as patients. And so as our patient volume jumps 40% in the next 10 years, you think we're going to have a lack of jobs? No. We're going to need more people all over the place in the hospital to handle all of these baby boomers that are going to push us to capacity. That's why you're seeing outpatient imaging centers get built and outpatient surgery centers getting built and all these little, they call them dock in a box, where you just have it's like a freestanding ER all by itself, because the hospitals aren't going to be able to handle the influx of all these patients coming in. They're going to start putting their outpatient surgeries in an outpatient surgery center and not doing them in the hospital, etc. So the jobs are there. And anybody that tells you that there's one thing that'll limit you besides, what I talked about if you suck in your clinicals. The other thing you have to watch is if you're in a highly populated area, and this happened in the Phoenix market, I saw it back in the day. When you're in a highly populated area like Phoenix or LA or New York City or Dallas or Chicago, where there's just tons of people, and then you got 10 x-ray schools pumping out students, you might have problems getting a job. But what you do is you just take any PRN you can get and take the hours when they offer them. Then you got your foot in the door. And then the next time somebody quits or gets fired or whatever, they're going to go to that PRN person before they go looking for somebody outside. Because as a PRN, just like that student, you're already working there. They already know your work ethic. They know you're good. They're going to pick a PRN over anybody else. And so the jobs are there. There's bonuses there. There is relocation bonuses. There's sign-on bonuses. Some people are even negotiating to have some of their student loans paid. So I just had an offline conversation through Messenger with somebody about how some hospitals will sign a contract with you saying, we will pay for your x-ray school, but you contract guaranteed to work for us up to X number of years after you graduate. So for example, you sign a contract that says, if you'll pay for my school, I'll do my clinicals and everything here or whatever. I mean, it doesn't really matter where you do your clinicals, but they'll pay for the school. And when you graduate, you work for them up to 2 years, because now they know that they don't have to worry about turnover as much because they've got you locked into a contract. And this is very common in nursing. Hospitals will pay for nurses to go to nursing school, and the nurses have to contract to work for the hospital for up to 3 years after they graduate, because you don't understand how much is involved in turnover and hiring new people. It's very expensive to rehire and re-educate and start all over again, advertising on the job boards and going through the whole recruitment process. I mean, it takes literally like 3 months to hire people. That's 3 months of work for HR people and radiology directors and the people that do the interviews. And it's a lot of time and money goes into this hiring process. So traveling tech, MRI man brought up traveling a little bit. I've got articles on my blog about being a travel tech. I've interviewed some people that own travel agencies, and that's a great job career in and of itself. They do tend to prefer people that have been doing it a little while, because to walk into a new place where you've never been, to hit the ground running, so they say, you kind of have to have some experience. But again, just like jumping into MRI school without going to X-ray school, if you can pull it off, do it. If you're one of those people, fake it till I make it, I'll appear like I know what I'm doing until I understand what I'm doing. If you can convince people that you're solid, go be a traveler, because you get a new job every 13 weeks or 6 months, whatever the contract is. You get paid almost double, maybe even more what a standard tech gets, because you're in high demand. You get like $40 a day for food. You get your hotel paid for. You get your $60 an hour or whatever it is as a traveler. And if it sucks, you're only there for like 3 months. You can leave and then you go somewhere else. And everything's paid. Your food's paid, your lodging's paid, and you get a super high. I don't know if you saw on my Facebook group just a couple of weeks ago, there was an agency offering like $2,000 a week or something like that for X-ray techs, because there was a strike, I guess, in Chicago, and they were worried. It was mostly a nursing strike, but they were worried that X-ray was going to get tied up in it. So they were bringing on a bunch of traveling X-ray techs and CT techs just in case, and the pay was just phenomenal. What we should get all the time. But I digress. Let's go back into the comment section. What's the difference between ARRT registration and ARRT certification? Well, if you're a tech, all you get is certification. There's no registration. I'm not sure what you're referring to. A school has to get registered with JCERT to be able to. Well, no, see, that's through the ASRT. I'm not sure what you mean, Krista, about ARRT registration and ARRT certification. But yeah, during COVID, hold on to your jobs. I always ask for more on my interview. I got really good after a year. Know your worth. Yeah, MRI man's right. Never accept. It never hurts. Even if you're just a quarter, you know how good you feel if you get asked, if you get told you got the job, and you say, okay, but I did some research and I got articles on it. You have an explanation. You don't say, well, I want an extra quarter. You say, I did a little bit of research and it looks like where I'm going to have to get a place to live is a little bit outside of town. It's going to cost me a little bit more gas mileage or whatever. You justify it. I'm going to have to find a babysitter for some of these shifts, whatever. So I really am going to need an extra 35 cents an hour. It's not that much to ask. I'm sure you guys can help me out a little bit here and give me 22, 37 or whatever. Help me pay for childcare or extra gas or whatever it is you're going to need. And usually they'll do it if you're reasonable. If you ask for like $2.50 more an hour on a $20 an hour job, that's too much. But football news, wherever he's at, is 2:25 in the morning. Good for you for staying up that late, bro. Hope you don't have to work tomorrow. It's gonna suck. Where are we at? Chris for buckets. How would you be a good way to speak about your pay? Check out some articles I have about it. If you're talking about how much to ask for in a salary. So the hospital has a range, and they did studies to figure that out. They did market research across the country to determine what the averages are, took like a baseline, and then depending if you have a career ladder or how it works where you're at, they figured out a tiered stepping system. And I have a video of that where I reviewed the difference between a Tech 1, Tech 2, and Tech 3. And I go over the job descriptions and what the differences are. But you can actually call the hospital and ask that. You should be able to call the HR department and say, what is your job pay range for a CT tech, X-ray tech, whatever. Don't ask them the specific hourly because they can't tell you, and they won't because it depends on how much experience you have and all that kind of stuff.
But you can say, what's the range? I'm considering coming to work for you, but I'd kind of like to know what your pay range is. Can you tell me the minimum and maximum for an x-ray tech? And they should say, sure, let me look that up, clickety click. We pay between $17 an hour and $23 an hour for our x-ray techs. Great, thank you very much. And that's the end of it. And then you can kind of figure out from there, well, if it's 17 to 23, the only people making 23 are the people that have been there 20, 30 years. And the lowest pay are the people right out of school. So if you're right out of school, you're going to be right around 17.50. Then you can figure, well, I'll ask for an extra quarter, and I'll tell them it's because I had extra training, or I have this other thing that I can do for them, or I've been a phlebotomist for 10 years, so I know healthcare very well. Whatever it is, you go from there. Patient volume, yeah, patient volume's going to do nothing but go up. What would be a good way to bring it up to? Well, if you're in your interview, just ask for the range. Just that simple. What is the pay range for this job that I'm interviewing for? Or ahead of time, what is the pay range for the job I will be interviewing for? Can you just tell me what the minimum and the maximum is? I understand that it's going to depend on my experience and how long I'm with the company, and if the company has a built-in ladder, career ladder, tiered system, merit system, whatever they call it there. But if they won't tell you the range, that's very sus to me, because that's almost like they're hiding something, and that's a very basic answer. So let's see. You guys were talking there, Guy. Jessica, as a manager director, have you dealt with a radiologist with a nasty attitude towards techs? Demeaning, thin-skinned, is it better to meet directly or go to their director? Oh yeah, those a-holes exist everywhere, and I'm sure MRI Man has seen those guys too. In fact, if you're on MRI Man, why don't you take that one first on it? If you have you ever dealt with a radiologist with a nasty attitude toward techs? What do you think?
Hey, yeah, definitely, for sure. So my first experience with that was when I was in clinicals. There would be a rad that was just didn't even seem like he was human, and this is my first experience with a rad. And this guy was just like a robot. He would come in and just looking like, I don't know, Terminator, just be like, why is this scan like this? Why didn't you guys do this scan? You guys need to do this scan. And just really like demanding. And then he would kind of just turn away and walk away. He would never say, hi, good morning, doing. He would just come in like just mad, you know? And so that was weird, and everyone would just be like, yeah, he's just like that, you know, he's just like that. So then moving forward, we just had, I started working at this outpatient place. This was actually per diem, and this is before I got my first full-time job. I was only there for a couple days, and the rad there was just a jerk, man. I asked him some questions. Like, I had only been trained 3 days at this facility, and I was like, hey, I was a new tech. I was like, hey, I have a soft tissue mass. You know, what is the protocol? I don't see a protocol here. I see upper, lower. Like, what do you want to see? And this guy right away just snaps on the phone. What do you mean? Why don't you know how to do your job? You should know. Why are you calling me right now? Are you serious? Are you kidding me? And I'm just like, whoa, you know, I'll be like, hey, I'm sorry. And I'm like, wow, is this how they are? I'm like, well, I'm sorry, you know, I've been here for a couple days. I'm not sure. I just want to make sure I'm doing the right scan. Oh, this is ridiculous. You should know. What do they have on there? What do you read about it? And it's just like, whoa. And he kind of like gave me the thing to run. I ran it. And then this guy calls me back. Oh, you forgot to do the T1 pre, that's that, or I don't know what he was saying. And I was just like, well, I did what you told me to do. And he's like, oh, it's ridiculous. And then I hear this guy talking about me, like in the next room, talking about, oh, this guy, he's a decent guy, but he's doing over there. So it's like this guy was like not even trying to coach me or help me on the job. It was like ridiculous. So that's when I started like, you know, I was like, I'm done with this stupid per diem job. And that's when I was looking around and got offered a job, you know, on the Central Coast. So I was like, you know, let's do this. Go over there. And I'm working at this place. They have like 3 different centers. bunch of radiologists. So I was a little nervous going in, talking to them, and I was like, man, I don't know how they're going to be. And I actually ended up meeting some really cool radiologists, and they were super chill and easy to talk to, and just like, yeah, just let me know if you have any problems. You know, that's like most of them. There's still some of them that are kind of like, they're not really people person. Like, they don't like talking to people. You know, they're in their little dark room, and you go in there, and they're just like, some of them don't really have a personality. They're really dry, but they're smart. You know what they do, but they're really dry, and you can't really crack jokes with all of them. But as long as they're easy to talk to, but when you go in there, they want the information quick. They're like, you know, robots. They're like robots, man. They just want to know. You can't come in there and be like, hey, did you see the game last night? No, they're like, what do you want? What's the patient saying? What's the last, what's the MRN number? What is the case? What is the indication? Do they have priors? Like, so they're just like that. You know, they have like 10 screens in their room, so you just gotta have your info real quick, boom, boom, boom. There's a couple radiologists I get along with, and they're usually cool. But I found that they're really baby radiologists. Like, they make us sort the images, window them, put them in order. They want us to attach paperwork, and they're really like babies. They'll put this stuff on hold and be like, you need to reorder this, blah, blah, blah. Does a patient have a prior? When they can do 2 clicks and look that they have a prior. So they're kind of like that. And then that was an outpatient. And then when I was at the hospital, the doctors there, I didn't get along with them. They were just mad all the time. When doctor would come in, he would just kind of like cuss. Like, it was really inappropriate. It's like, what the F are you guys doing? Why the F aren't you doing this? I'm working with a bunch of dummies here. And he would just go off like that. And I was just like, what the hell? What is wrong with this guy? And it turns out he ended up retiring. But yeah, it was just weird. I never been like totally just like disrespected by them. They're just like always in a bad attitude. I never had them, you know, put me down or throw anything at me or, you know, really just go off on me like that, like to that point. But if they did, I would definitely let them know. I'd be like, hey, you know, do not talk to me like that. And I would definitely go to HR, and I would, you know, definitely. But I always try to be, you know, cool with them, friends with them, and then, you know, just don't waste their time. If they're there and they're serious, I respect that. And when I approach them, I make sure I have all my information ready. And if I ever have questions, I always call them, because they do get mad, and they, you know, they'll give you a little attitude. Oh, you should have ran this. Oh, you should. I just find out what they want to see, and I kind of know what they want. And when I did work on I also worked on a trailer for a little while at a hospital, and the doctor there, the radiologist there, was just too kickback. This doctor was like, I'm like, hey, what do you, I got on the trailer, just like no protocols. I was like, hey, what do you want me to run? You know, he's like, just give me some pictures, give me some images. He didn't really care. You know, he was reading remotely, I guess. So that was interesting. So don't be surprised if your radiologist is just really dry and just not a people person and just wants to be by themselves in their little office. I mean, it is what it is. You know, I prefer to at least say hi, good morning, is everything okay? I prefer that. Then I have super cool radiologists that are just like, you know, they fly airplanes, and then they like go on bike rides on their breaks, and they're just easy, laid back, and those are the cool ones. And then usually the younger radiologists, the ones getting out of school, they're like super nice. It's usually the ones that have been doing it a long time. They're just really, man. But yeah, some of them are like babies. They're like, they call the manager, oh, can you order me lunch? Oh, how do you use the coffee maker? You know what I mean? I'm just like, wow, I sold for 12 years. Like,
What?
I make coffee. Like, I don't know. It's crazy. But yeah, that's what I got to say about that. I mean, if as a manager, you're seeing that the radiologists are, you know, putting down the employees and this and that, I mean, you guys should have an HR, and you guys got to have a meeting immediately, because this could turn into a bigger thing. You know, this can turn into a lawsuit. This is you can't put people down at work. You can't, you know, put them on a lower pedestal, and you know, employees shouldn't have to go through that, and I always tell them, at any job, if you feel like you're being treated unfairly, you need to speak up. There is lawyers out there for that, employment lawyers, and there's HR for that. So if any of you guys are ever feeling like you're being treated bad and are being put down or cussed at and all that, don't just take it, and that's not right. You know, just because they're a doctor doesn't mean they can treat you differently. I mean, I always joke around and say, you know, we all, you know, I just work here. I mean, I clock out at this time and we can meet outside. I always joke around. It's a little joke around, but you know, they're humans too. You know what I mean? Like, you know, hey, you know, I bet you they wouldn't talk to me like that, you know, outside of work. I bet you they wouldn't. You know, most of them are little frail, you know, skinny looking radiologists that look like they never done push-up in their life. So I'm just like, don't let them talk to me like that, you know?
Right.
I don't know. That's what I gotta say about that. I just don't like radiologists that think they're better than, you know, everybody, like they're God or something like that. I don't like that.
Yeah. So a lot of good points made there.
That's back to you, bro.
Yeah, a lot of good points made there. Thanks, buddy. I would say, and that's MRI Man. He's got his own YouTube channel. He's been doing it a while, licensed in MRI. The first thing I would say to everybody is, no matter where you're at in your job, even if you've been a tech for a while, know your job description. Have a copy of your job description. For a long time, you know, I would get hired. You'd see the job description, and as soon as you got the job, it got thrown in the trash. And you just did your job. But over time, you're going to start getting asked to do different things. People are going to start telling you to do different things. Things are going to start conflicting with what should you be doing versus what you're getting asked to do. And so you need to have a copy of your job description and know what you're supposed to do and not supposed to do. I had a resident. There was a guy in medical school who I was going to church with, and he said, I think he was up talking one day, and he said, I'm trying to decide what specialty I want to go into. And I talked to him afterwards. You know, obviously I'm pro radiology. And I said, hey man, why don't you think about becoming a radiologist? And he looked at me point blank and said, no, I like patients. And it woke me up and reminded me that, you know, a lot of radiologists took that role, that job, because they want to sit in their office and not be pestered and not be bothered. And you've seen those guys. You've seen those radiologists that if you dare knock on their door to ask them a question, they have a cow. They flip out. And that's a problem, because you should absolutely have full access to your radiologist. And that's my next comment that I made note of while MRI Man was sharing his experience, was to dumb it all down. We're all equal. I don't care what your degree is. We're all human. We're all here to do a job. We're all here to be respected. We give respect. And any doctor who thinks that because of his title he can talk down to you or mistreat you, and this all started because somebody said, how do you deal with it? I think it was Christina. Said, how do you deal with it? And flipped me out there for a minute when I said Joe Rogan was on. Got a little excited there. Threw me out, threw my thought pattern off. Dumb it down. We're all equal. Nobody talks to you that way. And I have articles and videos about no patient is allowed to cuss you out, throw something at you, spit at you, threaten you. If you go to the ER, if you're a student especially, but any tech, I would go to the ER and if some drunk started cussing at me or said, I'm back to the ER doc, and say, I refuse to do an exam on that patient. You can call me back when he's sedated or when he's calmed down. Because it's not my job to put myself in harm's way, and I'm not there to get disrespected like that. So I've usually found, and you probably heard my wife come in when we were talking about, you know, rads come on with good attitudes when they first get hired, and she said it usually takes about 3 to 5 years. I'll say 2 to 3 years before the honeymoon is over. We call it the honeymoon's over. They're no longer happy that they've got a job and that they're making money, and they're no longer making stipends for a living. And I've seen it. I've had really great rads. I thought, yay, here's a guy that really cares. And within like 3 years, he's that grouchy, man, my shift's over in 10 minutes. Can you ask Dr. So-and-so to do that? No, you're on shift. You're getting paid. And that's kind of the next thing I have is rads kind of want their own protocols, and you kind of have to try to, I mean, there's a fine line, right? If you're the tech and you're not the boss, you're not the admin, and you got a rad trying to tell you how to do your job, he's not your boss. Your admin is your boss. So you've got to set some ground rules there and say, look, man, I shouldn't have to come. You should go to your boss. I shouldn't have to I got 3 rads on today, and all three of them want MRI brains done different ways. That's crap. There should be one set protocol on how to do an MRI brain for the entire group. You don't have to go, well, who's reading today? It's Dr. Bob. Let me go to my protocol book. Dr. Bob likes his MRI brains this way. That's improper, inaccurate patient care. You cannot treat patients differently because you got a different rad on. It should be a set protocol, and you should have a book, either physical or electronic, on your computer with all your protocols. You shouldn't have to go to your rad and say, what do you like to see in an XYZ? It should be established by your admin. That's your admin's problem. Your admin should be the one. And I may not know MRI, for example, what the current protocol should be. So I pick an MRI manager or an MRI supervisor or super tech or lead tech or whatever you want to call them, and say, hey, for the next year, you and I and Dr. Bob are going to work on our protocols, and we're going to establish a protocol book. We're going to have one protocol for each body part, and you got to clear all that up. And then always annotate all your stuff, student or tech. Annotate everything. Patient combative, patient wouldn't lay still, patient had leg tremors, patient morbidly obese, whatever, patient's a T-Rex, whatever you got to do to explain, because you may be called up to look at something 6 months from now. They may be doing some review for some program at work where they do quality review every 6 months, and they pull up one of your exams that maybe wasn't optimal. You're not going to remember what happened on that thing. That's why you need to annotate on every case, either on the film or on the electronic medical record, what happened, why it's suboptimal, why did you clip the costophrenic angles on the chest rate, what, you didn't repeat it, why didn't you repeat it? Well, it says in my notes, the patient went to surgery. I barely had time to even get the chest x-ray before they went to surgery. I couldn't do a repeat. You're not going to remember that 6 months down the road. So make sure you annotate everything you do. And I've seen those a-hole rads. I had a radiologist who I highly respect, who would throw temper tantrums. And one day he was trying to put a PICC line in a fatty and couldn't get it. And he was on like his 8th attempt, and he couldn't get it. And he left the room with the bloody probe in his hand, walked through x-ray, threw it at the desk. It skipped off the desk, bounced up and hit the tech, blood splatter. Of course, they're in my office as the admin. I go straight to that doc and I'm like, what's your problem? And he's like, I just can't stand it when I get these really big patients who have these problems and they don't understand that it's because they don't know how to control their eating, that they're 500 pounds. And now I'm the one stuck trying to put a line in them because they can't get a regular IV. And right? I mean, it happens. And he said, what, you want me to go apologize? And I'm like, yeah, it damn sure wasn't the x-ray tech's fault that you couldn't get a PICC line in with the IR tech. And he did, and that's why I respect him, because he went back and he said, I apologize. I shouldn't have bounced that bloody ultrasound probe off the table. And that kind of leads me back to my point that we're all human, we're all employees, and you should address it one-on-one with that doctor. There's no reason you should be intimidated, and I get it. When you're a student, you're intimidated. When you're a new tech, you're intimidated. You just want to do your job and go home, and you don't want to have to confront anybody, but that's what makes you a better tech. When you stand up to these people and you say, look, I did my job, I annotated, I did whatever, you're getting frustrated with me because of XYZ, let's talk it out. Teach me. One thing I learned from one of the best HR administrators I've ever met was a key phrase, and he would say, help me understand. You talk to that doctor and say, help me understand what I could have done better. Help me understand what you don't like about my film. Help me understand what it is that's frustrating you so that I don't make the same mistake again. Just say, help me understand. And I'm telling you, most rads, you get them on a soapbox, you get them monologuing, and they will train the snot out of you because they love it. Probably because they don't get out of the room much. But that's what I found is once you get a rad, once you explain that you're there to learn, and we all are, we love this job. We love to I for the longest time could not pick out a pneumothorax. It was so difficult for me to see that pneumo. I could see all kinds of other things, but I could never see that pneumo. And I found a rad that I told that. He's like, and he would call me in, hey, come look at this. You see this? You see the shadowing? You see this line? They love that stuff. They love to teach. So confront the person. And then, Christina, the next step is if you confront, and this is true with anybody, you got a jackwagon in your department, whether it's a doc, a tech, a nurse, whatever, you always confront that person first, because we're all adults, and administration doesn't want crybabies, especially running above their head. The worst thing you could do is go above your director's head. But you go and confront that person head on. If you don't get relief, then you go to your boss. If you don't get relief, then you go to their boss and you escalate it. So that's how you should handle it. And doctors are held accountable. And one of the hospitals I worked at, we did these little reports that were supposed to be, they weren't tattletelling, they weren't to get anybody in trouble, but if something adverse happened, you made a note of it in this system called the MIDAS system. You filled out a MIDAS report. And it was just kind of a basic, like a police report type thing. Who was there, what time, what date, what happened, who said what, that kind of stuff. And if radiologists at this particular hospital got 3 Midases, they got pulled before a medical review board. And they had to explain why these 3 occurrences happened. And I've seen radiologists get fired. I've seen radiologists lose their jobs. So don't ever think that because somebody's a doctor or whatever, that they can mistreat you. Can they boss you around? Maybe. But can they tell you you're an idiot, or that your skill sucks, or that you need to go back to school? They cannot be derogative. They cannot talk down to you. They certainly can't touch you. And those are all things you can take to your HR department. So I noticed in the comments section, it started flying again. And I said I would do these for an hour. And I don't know how long Kwame can be on with us, but we're at about an hour and a half. So I'll probably wrap this up here in the next 10 minutes. But let me go through the comments section real quick. There was a question about private school versus public school, and I'm guessing Ahmad isn't in America. He's asking the difference between a private school and a public school. So here, the public schools mean that the citizens that pay taxes, that tax money goes to pay for the school. That's a public school. Anybody in that area can go there, and they just pay a minimal fee, because most of the expenses are being paid for out of tax money. And that's why x-ray schools at a public school are usually only $6,000 or $8,000. The private school is a private business, and it's paid for completely by the student tuition. So that's why they cost more money. There's no tax money going to those. So that's the biggest difference. And then all the people that say, well, I want to be an x-ray tech, but I don't have 30 grand. I can only afford 8. Well, then you got to wait, because there's like a 3-year waiting list to get into those, because they are more affordable. And the discussion we had earlier, me and the MRI man, was you get into yes, they're all 2-year programs, but you get in the private school faster, you graduate faster, you make more money faster. The public school, you wait 3 years to get in, then you graduate 2 years later. You're not making that fat wad till you're 5 years down the road. Where private, you're making that fat wad of cash 2 years down the road. So you got 3 years of making 60, 70,000 a year that you wouldn't have had in the public system. So, then let's see, Andrew, wasn't clear to me how private is better. That's what I just talked about. Thank you for the clarification. There's no waiting list here. It's based on grades, but that's right. You don't have to have good grades to get in a private, right? And everybody's different. There's private schools that let you in based on a point system. There's private schools that just interview you and you get in. And there's a lot of different criteria, and that's something you can call the school and ask, what do they base that on? How many students do you take? How many students do you get that apply on average? HR department is not there for the employees. They are there for the company. Real HR people will tell you the secret. So the truth there is they are there for the company. That's absolutely true. And that's a scary thought to people that aren't woke. But you have the power as an employee by using certain catchphrases. Like one that used to be super powerful is if you end up in HR and you say, I'm concerned about patient safety. You say that, and then whatever you say, whatever your problem is, and if they don't listen to you, you went to your HR and said you had a patient safety concern, and that's big. That's newsworthy big. That's corporate headquarters big. You don't just go in and start complaining, bob through a bloody probe at me. You go in there and say, I have a concern about safety. I have a concern about employee safety or patient safety or adverse effects or sentinel events. You find out what those key phrases are that trigger your HR people, and they have been trained. If they hear harassment, sexual misconduct, bigotry, if they hear certain key phrases, they snap to and they go, shit, I better get my hands around this before this gets any bigger. So you do have to kind of learn how to play that system, but there are ways to get HR's attention and get them on your side. And this is why I think everybody really should have a union. I know there's a lot of people that hate unions. I'm not in a union. I haven't been in one in a long, long time. But when you get in a union, this kind of crap doesn't happen. The union is there to represent you, and they keep the company from stepping on you all the time. But we're not there yet. There's a lot of hospitals that aren't unionized, and that's why a lot of our people are getting stepped on. Joe Rogan, late to the party, but I'm currently a rad tech student, and one of my professors who's the program director told me that majority of job opportunities come from connections you have to know people. It's both. I mean, it's mostly your clinicals, because like I said an hour ago, you just did a 1-year rotation. They'd be fools not to hire you. So if they don't hire you, it's because you didn't do something right, or there's a job freeze. But if you know people, absolutely. And I talk about that. Look up my article about Jackrabbit Joe. Jackrabbit Joe was an X-ray tech student down in Phoenix, and I was the director up in Flagstaff, 3 hours north. And Joe had always wanted to live up in the mountains, and so he decided he wanted to come work at my hospital. And at the time, when I started, I was manager, and then I worked my way up. But he started reaching out to my boss first, saying, my name's Joe. I'm a student down here. I'm working really hard to get really good grades, and I hope to come up there and work for you someday. I just wanted to reach out and say hello, introduce myself. And every semester, that guy would email my boss his grades. Look, I just finished the semester. I got all A's or whatever. And then he started coming up. He came up for lunch one time. And then he came to an employee Christmas party one year. And before you knew it, this cat graduated, knew everybody in the department. We hired him on instantly because we all knew him. We knew what kind of a guy he was, and we were okay with that. He didn't do his clinical rotations there, but he had shown us by coming up and meeting us and talking to us and showing us his grades and that kind of stuff. We knew what kind of character this guy was. So read the article about Jackrabbit Joe and the different things he did to get to know people if you don't. And I've got other articles too about how you use LinkedIn to find out who the boss is, who the CEO is. You can use LinkedIn to find out who's in all these key positions, and you can reach out to them through there. You can find them on Facebook. There's a lot of methods to get in that job. But the most important is get your clinical there and kick ass as a student when you're doing your clinicals. Build relationships. What are your thoughts on his comments, and what, just to give some background info, this director is well known and his resume is pretty elite. Yeah, obviously that's life. It's who you know, not what you know, is what a lot of people say. And in our case, we all go, no matter what X-ray school you go to, it's a 2-year school and it's accredited by the same group. We all learn the same thing, whether you go to private, public, whatever. If it's ARRT certification that you get in the end, we all learned the same thing. Some just may have learned it better. We may have had better teachers or better clinical instructors or whatever. So we're all kind of on the same playing field. It's who we are as a tech that matters, not necessarily what we learned. It's who we are. It's like Jim Rohn always said, it's not what happens to you that matters. It's how you respond to what happens to you that matters. We're all going to get dunked on. We're all going to get bad teachers, bad bosses, crappy coworkers, crappy patients, paychecks that have stuff missing on them. We're all going to get that stuff. And it's not about that and getting pissed about that. It's about how you respond to those adverse events and how you handle it. So Joe's out in California. That's where MRI Man's at too, Joe Rogan. You guys are talking. Let's see. I agree with the connections, but sometimes if you put in the effort, you may just get the opportunity. Yeah. You don't have to know everybody. You just do a good job. Fake name. Yeah. I figured that. Why would Joe Rogan come to my channel, right? One protocol. That's it. I agree. Yeah. Oh, and that's such a huge fight. And I've been places where it takes years. You really, a good director will put somebody in charge of each modality and have that person work directly with the radiologist. And that's another thing that varies depending on where you worked. Your radiologists, like in one place, each rad may do a different body part, or each rad may do a different modality, or you may have a neuro radiologist and an MSK guy and a body guy. So it just depends on how your rad group divvies up the work. But in the end, I would say they should all read everything, but they don't. You have rads that don't want to touch PET scans. I didn't go to school for PET scans. I'm not good at reading them, when the truth is they take a long time to read and they don't want to do it. You have no control over what the rads do, and you have no control over how they treat you. What you have control over is how you respond to it and what you do about it. We already talked about that. So glad to finally make it to live. Hey, Vashi, welcome. If you have any questions, put them on there. I'm going to go another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll call it a wrap. Morton, Ron, greetings from Denmark. Just about finished my ultrasound. Looking forward to signing off the patients myself. Big ultrasound fan. I love ultrasound. I even learned a little bit of echo at one point, but I love ultrasound. I tell you, I have a really hard time picking a favorite modality because they're all cool in so many different ways. And that's something you really only learn when you start becoming a multi-modality tech. We talked about that early on. Somebody's going straight into MRI, and they said, should I go back when I'm done and get x-ray? You don't have to. And it makes you more valuable in some ways, and you're not going to make any extra money for it in other ways. But ultrasound is so cool. It's one of the few things that you can do at home, right? They make the eye butterfly that plugs into your iPhone now, and you can check your carotids, you can check your baby, you can check anything really from your phone as long as you know what you're looking at. They can work in the mall and do gender reveals with no licensure. They're even on Facebook now doing gender reveals in people's houses. They charge $200 to show up with a probe and say male or female if you can see it, right? Love ultrasound. Don't care much for vascular, if I'm being honest. Not a big vascular guy. Can't stand trying to get under the mandible for the carotids. And there's other, legs, venous studies, just mapping for surgery. Anyway, but ultrasound's cool. I did that for a long time. Loved it. Great pay. Lots of callback. Always getting called in the middle of the night for either a leg study or an OB, testicular torsion. Constantly getting called in. Lots of call money. We'll have to talk about call money sometime. Glad to hear from Denmark. That's way cool. This is, well, that's good. Harassment here in my head. Any advice on choosing a modality in which you don't need venipuncture? I don't think ultrasound does. Ultrasound doesn't. So NucMed does. They do tracers in NucMed. IR usually have, I don't know, depends on the procedures you're doing. You have nurses with you usually in IR, so they'll be doing the IV starts. But if you're doing stuff that's just you and the rad, you may be doing them. I don't think you ought to try to get around it, brother. I think you ought to embrace it. Embrace the suck, as one of the military authors out there says, because it's one more skill, one more arrow in your quiver, one more bullet in your belt. And it's not hard. Learn with the butterfly needle first. It's not hard, and you should get that training in school. Unless, were you the one that said you're an ultrasound? No, that was Morton. Yeah, one and only. You're just gonna have to. I think you should learn it. It's not hard. Of course, me and we're both phlebotomists, so it's easy for us to say. And my wife, believe it or not, used to pass out at needles, and she's an X-ray tech, and she's been an X-ray tech for 10 years now. So you get used to it. Difference between director and manager. Director is more broad-based, dealing with other departments. Maybe even out in the community, meeting doctors, saying, why aren't you sending us your work? Thank you for sending us your referrals. Directors are a higher level, more involved in high-level committees, talking about capital equipment purchases, financing, other committees that involve other things around the hospital. Managers are more the day-to-day work, looking at your reports on volumes, making sure that employees are clocking in and out appropriately, not abusing the clocking in early and clocking out late and clocking no lunch. Every place is different. There's the tech, and then there's a lead tech, and then there's a supervisor, and then there's a manager, and then there's a director, and then there's system director, and not every place has all of those. Supervisor, I mean, the lead tech really is just a person that kind of is on the floor that says, okay, we got an order for a hip. Bob, you're next up. Why don't you run and do that? I'll run and get this chest x-ray. Tammy, you go do the finger and ER or whatever. The supervisor typically is the person standing at the computers, looking at all the studies, making sure everything's getting done, QCing all your films. Tom, you clipped an angle. Did you get a repeat? You did. Cool, great. Packaging them up, making sure they're getting sent to the rads in a timely manner. The supervisor maybe does the scheduling, that kind of thing. And then the manager is more of the walks around, checks on everybody. There's probably some big productivity board in your department that says how you're all doing and all these different data points. And that they start getting into the reporting and the data pulls and running reports and checking how proficient everything's being. And then those managers report all that up to the director. And the directors more and more, just like you guys are becoming multi-modality techs, the directors are becoming directors of multiple departments. So you'll see a radiology director who's also the cath lab director, or radiology and transport, or radiology and some other registration and scheduling. There's several, one of the big do more with less things out there right now is you guys do more modalities, directors cover more departments, and we even have it all the way up now where you don't even have a CEO of a hospital, you have a regional CEO who's over 3 hospitals, and it's the CNO and COO that are foot soldiers running the hospital. So it just depends on where you're at. Skip the first question. What was the first question? How far up is it? Some jobs you can pick up with furthering your study and getting a bachelor's. Advanced degree gets you nowhere unless you get into management. You can be a tech with an associate and you can go work for GE and sell C-arms. You can be a tech with an associate and go work for Siemens and be an application specialist and just go to different hospitals and sit in the OR, and they'll send techs up to you and you train them how to use the C-arm in the OR. All that stuff is associates. If you want to get up in management, you got to go for the bachelor's, usually master's now to get into director spots. You won't get paid anymore. If you go get a bachelor's or a master's, the hospital doesn't care. If you're a tech and you go get a master's, you're still a tech to them. They don't care. Master's is more for management. And even when you're in management, you don't get paid anymore for a higher degree. So that's the difference. I think I'm going to wrap it up. I'm right now, Joe wants to know what I'm doing right now. I'm working on my doctorate. I'm actually out COVID. I did a 90-day contract at a hospital trying to get them back on their feet. And it was right in the middle of COVID. I was gowned up. And I actually got in trouble. I got in trouble from HR because I got all gowned up for COVID. I mean, hood, everything. And I went to do a portable. And one of the nurses thought it was hilarious because I was doing poses and she was taking pictures. And so she sent them to me and I put it up on my Facebook because I was working on my freaking birthday in COVID, fully gowned up. And I posted on Facebook, I'm working on my birthday, go team, whatever. I got called in the next day to HR and they said, you take pictures in the hospital, that's against company policy. We want you to take it down. And here's a verbal write-up. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And that's why I'm on this crusade of, I'm not saying go take pictures in the hospital, but I am saying share your experience on a social platform like YouTube or Clubhouse, where MRI Man's on Clubhouse with me right now. And if you didn't hear my Clubhouse pitch earlier, if you want a Clubhouse invite, use my contact form on my blog to send me a request and I'll send you an invite to Clubhouse, because then you can get on and talk with us and share your experience. We can't do that on Facebook because it's all up on the side. But yeah, I'm one of those bosses that I don't sit behind a desk. I'm out there doing exams. And I still like doing ultrasounds. I still like doing CTs. I still like doing x-rays. I got too rusty in MRI. It's too long ago. I don't mess around with MRI unless I absolutely have. Like I'll go sit in and cover somebody punching, and I know how to get them through the different sequences and things like that. I can see that it's counting down, and I know how to talk to them and tell them we're going to do another sequence and that kind of stuff. But I'll help out an IR if there is an IR. Anyway, I'm working on my doctorate. That's the cool thing. I got a traditional bachelor's in psychology, and I went and got my MSRS from Weber State. And I got that with an X-ray license and any bachelor's degree. So that got me the MSRS, the Master of Science in Radiologic Science from Weber State. And it was like 16 grand. It's a public school, 16 grand for a master. And I took that to Nebraska Methodist. I got a master's. They let you in. I mean, I had to interview and that kind of stuff, but get my doctorate, and I think it's about 30 grand for a doctorate, which is really affordable. So, and it's all online, especially now with COVID. Everybody's online now, but don't be afraid. And that's up to you. I have always wanted a doctorate degree. I've always wanted one since I was a kid. So it has no play on my job. My administrators could care less. They're like, what are you going to get a doctorate for? We're not going to pay you anymore. I don't care if you're going to pay me. This is about me. It's another Jim Rohn thing. You should always work harder on yourself than you do on your job, because at the end of the day, they don't care. It's about you. Always take family first, friends first. Don't ever give up a family event to go work an extra shift, because they don't care. You're just another person there filling a seat. In the end, they won't care. Nobody's going to look back and go, remember all those shifts Ron covered back when we needed help? They don't care. In fact, your bosses, how many times has your boss changed? Every 2 years, every 3 years? I was director of a radiology department for 4 years, and I beat out the previous 6 directors. They were like, it was a big joke. Ron's been here longer than anybody. Doesn't matter. Nobody cared. They didn't give any awards or anything. I don't expect a reward. But the turnover, if you can stay on the front line, stay on the front line. There's this thought that if I get to management, I can make a bigger difference. And you can in some ways, but you are just cannon fodder when you get to management, because they'll just replace you with anybody and everybody, and they could care less. You can't get rid of all the techs because there's nobody to do the job, but you can get rid of admin at any time. So let me finish up these last few comments. Thank you for dedicating your time today. I appreciate it. Can't wait to do the next live. It's the first one for me. Yeah, every Saturday, brother. Sometimes it's 9 in the morning. Sometimes it's afternoon. We're kind of playing around. You can always hit me up on the Facebook group. Don't forget that. I think these comments stay over here in the sidebar permanently. I hope. When I've never gone back and looked at a live after the fact, but I always post all these things we talk about on my blog and YouTube channel in the sidebar. So that's so awesome. So check out the blog, check out the Facebook group where I'm on every day, answering questions every day. And I'm going to do this every Saturday. And if you love your modality, or even if you're a student and you think you have something to say and share, use my contact form on my blog. Tell me about it. I'll bring you on, especially if I can get you in the clubhouse with me and MRI Man, because the more interactive we make this, the more we all learn. And that's the whole reason for this thing, is so people can learn what we're doing and we don't find out, like I found out in x-ray school about barium minimus, but damn sure wasn't in the catalog. They didn't tell me about that in my interview. I was sitting in class one day when they said, yeah, you got to put it and inflate the balloon and Sims position. I'm like, what? Nobody told me about that. I was in all school when I learned about transvaginal exams. I'm like, wait, what? I got to do what? Where? They don't tell you that stuff. So that's what this is about. It's about educating everybody, people that are interested in what we do. They don't know anything about what we do. I would have rather known. It wouldn't have changed my mind, but you should know that kind of stuff going into this. If you can't handle blood and you're applying for x-ray school, probably not the best idea. So 22-year-old rad tech student here, super hungry, always want to learn, appreciate all the info. Boss, I'll be 50 this year. So let's see. I think iron cath lab. Depends on where you're at. Cath lab, you're gonna be on your feet all day. We can talk about that next time. Cath lab and IR, you're on your feet all day. Go find my video on good shoes, because you're gonna need them. Hocus, Bondi 6, Bondi 7. You're gonna need them if you're gonna do cath lab or IR. Keep in touch, Kay. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off here. I'm gonna let MRI Man tell you how to find him, what his channels are, if he has any other way that you can talk to him, and then after MRI Man says his goodbyes, we'll call it quits. Go ahead, Kwame.
Hey Ron, first, thanks for having me on. This is awesome. I'm glad for all you guys showing up. You can find me, of course, on my YouTube channel, MRI Man. New videos every Thursday and Friday. You can also follow me on Instagram at The Real MRI Man. So yeah, you can hit me up on either platforms. I'll definitely be back on the show, and definitely looking forward to doing more clubhouses. And just like Ron said, if you guys are, like what you do, you're a student, you're ultrasound tech, X-ray tech, MRI tech, you guys should share that information on social media and get on here with us on Clubhouse, on YouTube, post some videos. I'm trying to make this community just welcoming, and I'll share your videos, whatever. We'll all learn together. I learned a lot today within these first 2 hours, and yeah, it's awesome, man. Yeah, check it out.
Well, thanks for joining me and everybody else. Yeah, we encourage you. Do whatever you do. If you TikTok, if you Instagram, if you Pinterest, whatever you do, share your stuff. Just be careful. No patient information. We've all seen the foreign body X-rays all over the place. We've all seen the baby blender, pigostat pictures. Just keep your face out of it. Keep the patient information out of it. Keep your company's name, the hospital name out of it. But share that stuff. We all share. We all learn. And keep safe. Wear your PPE. Wash your hands. And I'll see you on the Facebook group. I will see you next Saturday for another YouTube Live. And we'll call it good. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks, Kwame. Appreciate you coming by, man.
All right. Catch you later, Ron.
All right. See you guys.
I just realized everybody is here to party.
Greetings and welcome, fellow barium intists, fluoroscopists.
I'll have to do an outro for that instead. All right, I'm signing off YouTube. See you guys later.